Tim Walz. Now, we haven't really heard much from Tim Walz, but Tim Walz is still the governor of Minnesota. I visited Minnesota. I visited Minneapolis and St. Paul. I've seen what happened. I will tell you that over there in Minneapolis and St. Paul, it is a migrant stronghold. It is a migrant stronghold. There is no ifs, ands, and buts about it. As a matter of fact, the choice of migrant over there in St. Paul and Minneapolis, which we do obviously have some regular folk out there too, but the choice of migrant over in St. Paul and Minneapolis just so happens to be Somalis. It is. Somalians over in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota are over there kicking names and taking babies. I know it's supposed to be kicking butt and taking names. Kicking names and taking babies. It's crazy. Is anybody over here living in Minneapolis or the close area? Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. This is Tim Walz. Tim Walz is saying that he's going to start holding town halls in Republican districts in wake of the wage cuts, in wake of the Doge cuts. Check it out.
Governor Tim Walz is Democrat of Minnesota, a state heavily impacted by Trump's government purges and its trade war with Canada, which of course it borders. Governor Walz joins me now. Governor, great to have you on the program.
Now, I'm going to observe this interview and I'm going to do it objectively, and I want to know if Tim Walz is saying some good points, and I'm going to give him points for saying it, and I'm going to hold him accountable for the things that he says is bad, okay?
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Let me just start with what this all looks like from your position as governor of Minnesota. Obviously a state right next to Canada. I imagine you have good relationships. I imagine there's a lot of trade that goes on between your state and Canada. What has this all meant for your state?
Minnesotans like Canadians. We share a lot, and we share a great relationship. First of all, they're our biggest trading partners. It's incredibly disruptive. The number of people who cross the border both ways, Minnesotans going into Canada to work and Canadians coming into Minnesota. It's beneficial to both of our countries. Look, we get 90% of our potash, which is the fertilizer for our huge ag economy. That's real impacts on real producers, driving up costs for producers at a time when we can't sell our products because Donald Trump has this ridiculous trade war going on. And just quite honestly, the chaos and the uncertainty that it causes, so many Minnesotans are asking, when was Canada our enemy? And it makes no sense. It's very difficult as a governor to be able to set and think about budgets, to be able to think about how are we going to continue to attract folks here. And then he starts, as he did today, a day that I've dreaded as a teacher, as a parent of a student in public schools, and as governor, a senseless attack on the Department of Education. And I hope that I think your viewers know there's no plan behind this. Donald Trump doesn't know how anything works. Donald Trump is this caricature that had a reality TV show that pretended like he knew how to run businesses. The reality is he doesn't. As a governor, we have to make these things work. Local school districts have to understand what are the impacts going to be when you lay off 1,300 experts who are there to make sure that every one of our children get an equitable education. And so it's chaos. And look, I think he thrives in this. And then he tells his supporters that only he can fix it. He's the guy who goes and starts the fire and then stands there and gives directions and acts like he knows how to put the fire out. He has no clue. So it's an arsonist with our economy. It's an arsonist with our institutions. He surrounds himself with people. The idea that the Secretary of Education would not know what IDEA meant, Individual Disability Education Act, that's like your mechanic not knowing how to put air in your tire. And she's in charge of this nation's educational progress. It is catastrophic. And look, the short-term numbers you were talking about, Chris, are real. And I think it flips people like, oh, people who say, I voted for Donald Trump. I didn't know he would fire me. No kidding. No kidding. What I worry about is the generational change that this would make. Look, Ruby Bridges needed to be escorted into those schools and the folks who went into Little Rock because we didn't have an education department that ensured her civil rights were respected. That's gone now. And
I should have my iPad with my Apple Pencil so that I can write down a lot of these talking points that I'm trying to listen to him through. First of all, Tim Walz is it's interesting that a person, now consider the source before we get into some of his talking points. It's interesting that somebody will talk about somebody being a caricature when in reality, Tim Walz was pretending to be a person that was on the front lines but was exposed, and he thinks that we forgot this. He was exposed of having stolen valor. Exposed for having stolen valor. Tim Walz doesn't even have a house. He doesn't even own a home. Tim Walz wouldn't know what a good investor is if it hit him directly in the face. And this is objectively, because how can you criticize a great businessman like Trump, who has started numerous business and had enormous success, a billionaire before he ever ran for office, and Tim Walz has never actually even really owned a home? Let me say that again. Tim Walz doesn't even own a home. He's one of the few poor Democrats. He's a poor Democrat, and he's talking about somebody not knowing business. Now, I give Tim Walz credit for the fact that he doesn't seem to be one of the corrupt ones. He's just one of the ones that put tampons inside of boys' bathrooms in order to try to justify diversity, equity, and inclusion and support the trans community. However, how can you talk about Trump being a bad businessman when he literally is a billionaire and you don't even own a home, and the only monies that you've ever received is funds from taxpayers? It's true. Every single paycheck that Tim Walz has ever collected has come on the back of taxpayers. It's come on the back of taxpayers. Now, I will say that one thing that is true, because us as Michigan, we are a border state for Canada also. There are a lot of people that drive to and from Canada. Canadians drive over to Michigan in order to work because they got jobs here. I don't really see a lot of people driving over to Canada for work, but I don't know any about that. I don't know anybody that drives over to Canada for work, but I do know a lot of Canadians come over here in order to benefit off of the American economy. They have jobs here in Michigan, and they drive over the Canadian Bridge, or they drive under the tunnel, and they go back and forth as a part of their daily commute, because it only takes like 25, 30 minutes for us to be over in Canada and go through border patrol, and go through the bridge and all of that, and vice versa. But that has nothing to do with a tariff war. Has zero to do with it. Nobody is saying that we're blocking off the border to prevent Canadians from coming over here or prevent Americans from being able to travel back and forth through Canada. That has no relevance. See, he tried to throw that in there. And see, one of the things that Democrats do a lot of times, and Tim Walz is really good at it, because he can communicate a coherent statement. And it's one of the reasons that they thought that he was going to shore up and be able to back up Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris couldn't put together a coherent statement a lot of times, is they often at times throw in facts, things that are true that we all both can agree on, to make it seem like, okay, I resonate with this guy. Oh, yes, Minnesotans and Canadians travel back and forth to go to work. Okay, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? You see what I'm saying? And the Department of Education has always been in shambles, personally. The Department of Education has always been in shambles. I know here in Michigan, especially with our public schools that are largely subsidized, not only by federal dollars, but also by taxpayer money, as far as the money that you pay in your property taxes. I know that the way that a lot of schools get money is on count day. Has nothing to do with educating the students, has nothing to do with class sizes. We know that there's a lot of migrants that are inside of these classes that are exploding, and the teachers can't even teach anymore. And we got so many diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that teachers are going through training. Instead of figuring out how it is that they can put together their class curriculum, they're spending more time doing training on diversity, equity, and inclusion to make sure that they're not getting sued by a student that then can take advantage of whatever is happening and saying that you're discriminating against me because I can't go inside of the girls' bathrooms. The Department of Education has been in shambles for a long time. It's about time for a revamp and an overhaul.
And my son, those of you, your viewers who are out there now who have individual education plans that let them thrive and be their best people, what do they want us to do? Warehouse these kids, not give them the skills? And this is going to impact local schools directly. So it is absolute chaos. And the question I ask is, you said it, Chris. He didn't run on this stuff. He told you he'd lower prices. You know the one thing Linda McMahon in her press conference did not say? She did not use the word children, if I'm not mistaken. She did not talk about educational outcomes. They view education as an expense, just like Elon Musk talks about entitlement programs. Those aren't entitlement programs. Those are the things keeping my mom alive. She paid into Social Security for 80 years. She should get that money back. And that's not what they believe.
But it is an entitlement program because it is a Ponzi scheme and we don't even have it funded. And we robbing Peter to pay Paul. And in order for us to keep it solvent, we got to make sure that the next generation then pay into it because we establish it to be a Ponzi scheme. And so if we don't cut the budget from the federal government and all of these other things that are, and again, remember that Social Security, it doesn't even matter whether it's a Ponzi scheme or not. Trump is not saying that he's going to get rid of it. He's saying that we need to audit it to make sure that the people that are supposed to be getting Social Security get it, and the people that aren't, that we not getting finessed as taxpayers. I don't see why that's unreasonable.
I want to go back just on that Canada issue and then come back around to the education cuts. I mean, you know, this insanity about we're going to take Canada, 51st state, calling Justin Trudeau governor. It's nuts and it's stupid and it's silly. But at a certain level, it's like, I think across the border, understandably, they're starting to take it seriously. It's the only possible feasible rationale that anyone could kind of figure out for this trade war he's launching. And I wonder, again, as a border state with relationships, you've been talking to your other leaders in Canada. There was this 25% surcharge on your electricity, which was dropped at the last second.
Yeah.
So stop saying that there was a surcharge when it wasn't. It was something that he said that he was going to do. It was used as a negotiating tactic. You wasn't charged even a dime over what you was. Me, as a resident of Michigan, and I own a whole bunch of places. Did you see me panicking? Did you see me tripping? Did you see me at any time? Did you see me worried about, oh my God, my electricity is going to be surcharged or cut off? It was going to happen, and then they dropped it at the last minute. Of course they dropped it at the last minute because our president knows what he's doing.
What do you make of those threats and what they mean to that relationship between our two nations?
I wish I could ask these questions.
Yeah, and so I don't blame the Canadians. They have to respond to protect their sovereignty and what they're doing. And
yeah, I agree with you, Arthur. Arthur says, see, and they just say stuff. Hold up, you paying the Social Security as you work, correct? Correct. How old is his mama? Has she been working for 80 years? What, you know how these older people, they've been working since they was 3. They've been paying in the Social Security since they was 3. His mama probably 83 years old, and she been paying into it since she was 3. Yeah, man, I've been paying in the Social Security for 80 years. I'm glad you caught that because I missed it. And the minute that you said it, I remember what he said.
Trump puts these on and takes them off. This has so much more damage than him pretending like it didn't impact. We have become untrustworthy. Yeah. And so if they are buying our soybeans or they're buying our corn, they're going to go look for a fair trading partner. And what Donald Trump doesn't understand, he thinks what he did in 2018, where we subsidized farmers to the tune of about $1.63 per bushel of soybeans just to keep them above water as he was fighting his trade war, we lost markets that took us decades to cultivate. They went to Brazil. They went to Argentina. And now we've got a surplus of products while input costs have gone up and nowhere to sell them. This is catastrophic. I had an event out on a farm. I know many of those people didn't vote for us. But what I know about farmers is they understand international trade a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. And they know this is just ridiculous. I think he gets this in his head. And it's, it is like it's like
Tim's own family didn't vote for him.
Like it's not real. These are long-term cultural shared values. They matter. And the damage that's being done, the lack of trust that's happening, very difficult. So when I call Premier Ford or I call to Manitoba, they feel bad. They know that this is not all the American people doing it. So you the
treasonous one. You the one that Doug Ford, the premier in Canada, was saying that he talked to American governors and they don't necessarily agree with Trump. So you the treasonous one. Okay. All right. So we found him, y'all. We found some of the governors as treasonous. Doug Ford, when he was pretending to announce tariffs against the United States of America, when he said that he was going to surcharge us on electricity and he was going to shut off the electricity over here. Remember that? And he said, yeah, man, I talked to the governors over there. I talked to a lot of these people. He wouldn't name no names, but he said that I was talking to all of the governors over there. And guess what? They don't like what Trump is doing. It's Tim Walz. Tim Walz is the first one to call, hey, Doug, we stand with Canada. We don't stand with what goes on here in the United States of America.
But they feel like they have no recourse except to respond accordingly. And again, he negotiated the damn trade deal with them. If trade is so bad with Canada, he was the guy who signed the deal. It defies logic. But look, I think this is how he ran business. He stiffed contractors. He stiffed workers.
I know it's not just him. I know that Governor Gretchen Whitmer is calling too here in Michigan. I know a lot of them. Absolutely. But he's telling on himself. And he's being very transparent about whether or not he's going to be treasonous or not.
He doesn't pay his bills. He declares bankruptcy. The one thing is, his claim that he's the business president, he is the worst possible business executive that I have ever witnessed. And I hope, this.
You never started a business. Let's say hypothetically that a person has started thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of different businesses in which he has literally amassed a net worth of well over $1 billion. But he has 5 LLCs that wind up filing for bankruptcy in order to protect his personal wealth. And that's some of the things that he's done. You're telling me that's not a great businessman? So we don't consider 50 Cent a great businessman because one of 50 Cent's businesses was filed for bankruptcy? But yet we celebrate him and we herald him. You're telling me that he's not a great businessman? Okay. All right, Timmy. And I don't want to hear Timmy anymore. Timmy is tired. Timmy is just throwing insults. He's throwing ad hominem attacks. He's making himself look stupid, and his own family didn't even vote for him. So shout out to Timmy Walz. Shout out to Tim Walz. Anyways, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications.